The cries of newborns echoed through the maternity ward of a bustling hospital in Lagos, where families waited anxiously for news of their loved ones. Among them was a young couple, Tunde and Amara, who had been married for just 2 years. Their journey to this day had not been easy. Amara had endured a complicated pregnancy with weeks of bed rest, endless hospital visits, and moments of fear that the baby might not survive. But now, as she lay on the delivery table, sweat dripping down her face, she held tightly onto Tunde's hand, waiting for the sound that would change their lives forever. The room was tense yet expectant, as the team of doctors and nurses worked with practiced precision. A moment later, the baby arrived, but instead of the usual cheers and relief, a heavy silence swept across the room. The cries of the newborn came out strong and sharp, but the faces of the medical staff told a different story. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances, and the doctor paused, holding the child in a way that betrayed hesitation. Amara, exhausted but alert, caught the shift in the atmosphere. She tried to sit up despite the pain. "Doctor, why is everyone quiet? Is my baby okay?" Her voice trembled. The doctor cleared his throat, his expression calm but not reassuring. "Your baby is alive and strong," he said carefully, "but she was born with some unique features." Confusion and panic swirled inside Amara. She turned to Tunde, who looked just as lost, searching the doctor's face for clarity. The baby was wrapped quickly, but Amara noticed the hesitation in the nurse's hands, as if she was afraid of what she held. Tunde demanded, "What do you mean by unique features? Let us see our child." The nurse reluctantly handed the baby over. When Amara looked down at her daughter, her heart skipped. The child's skin was lighter than expected, with patches that seemed almost translucent. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, shone in a shade of gray unusual for a newborn. Even her fingers appeared slightly longer than normal, curling delicately as though each one was painted with precision. Amara's initial shock quickly turned to tears. She didn't understand what she was seeing. Was her child deformed? Was she sick? Or was this simply something rare? Whispers began in the ward outside, filtering into the delivery room. Other women, visitors, and even some hospital staff exchanged words that stung Amara's ears. "It's a sign," one muttered. "Maybe a curse," another added. The murmurs spread like wildfire, and soon rumors overshadowed the fragile joy of the new parents. Tunde tried to shield his wife from the noise. He bent closer, whispering, "Don't listen to them. This is our daughter. She's perfect." But his own hands trembled as he touched the baby's small fingers, unsure of what lay ahead. He could not hide the worry on his face. The doctor eventually asked to run further tests to understand what they were seeing. His tone was professional, but his eyes betrayed curiosity and unease. He assured them the baby was breathing well, her vitals were strong, and there was no immediate threat to her health. Still, he admitted he had never seen such features before in his years of practice. Amara clung to her child, refusing to let go even for a moment. Her heart was torn between love and fear. She wanted to rejoice in the gift of life, but the reactions around her made her feel as though she had brought something strange into the world. She prayed silently, asking God for strength and clarity, begging that this child would not be a source of sorrow. As night fell, the hospital remained abuzz with whispers. Some staff lingered, sneaking curious looks at the baby whenever they thought no one was watching. Even family members who rushed to the hospital carried mixed expressions, some congratulatory, others clearly unsettled. Amara noticed the change in their eyes when they saw her daughter, and it pierced her heart deeply. Tunde stood tall, protecting his wife from the stares. But inside, questions gnawed at him. Would society accept this child? Would his family understand? Would neighbors mock them? He knew how harsh Lagos could be with its mix of superstition, gossip, and judgment. Yet as he watched his daughter yawn and curl into Amara's chest, he felt a quiet determination. Different or not, she was his blood, his responsibility, and nothing would change that. The night stretched long and heavy, but in that hospital room, beneath the hum of machines and distant cries of other newborns, a new story had begun. A child had come into the world different, and though the meaning of her arrival was still shrouded in uncertainty, her presence was undeniable. To her parents, she was both a question and an answer, A fear and a miracle, and they could only wait to discover what destiny had written for her. The following morning, the hospital room was filled with quiet tension as Amara sat on the bed, cradling her baby against her chest. Nurses moved in and out, pretending to be professional, but their curious glances betrayed them. Tunde paced the room, barely able to sit still. The night had been long, and neither of them had gotten much sleep. At sunrise, the pediatric specialist finally arrived, accompanied by 2 other doctors. They introduced themselves calmly, but the weight of their presence only made Amara's heart race faster. "We need to run some detailed tests," the lead doctor explained, his tone careful. "Your daughter appears healthy, but we want to be certain there are no underlying conditions." Amara hesitated before surrendering the baby. She kissed her forehead, whispering a prayer before letting the nurse carry her away. Watching the small bundle disappear into the examination room was one of the hardest moments of her life. Hours dragged by, each tick of the clock sounding louder than the last. Tunde tried to console her, but he was just as restless, staring at the door as though willing it to open faster. When the doctors finally returned, their expressions were unreadable. Amara braced herself for the worst, gripping Tunde's hand tightly. The lead doctor sat down, opened a file, and cleared his throat. "Your child has no deformity, no illness, and no sign of any health condition," he began slowly. Relief washed over Amara, and she exhaled deeply, but the doctor wasn't finished. "However, what we found is unusual." He explained that the baby's skin pigmentation was the result of a rare genetic mutation, one that gave her cells a unique ability to regenerate faster than normal. Her gray eyes were linked to heightened sensitivity, allowing her to perceive light and detail beyond what average human eyes could. Even her elongated fingers were not a deformity but an indication of advanced motor coordination. In simple terms, the child had been born with extraordinary abilities hidden within her very DNA. The room went silent. Amara blinked, trying to process the words. Tunde leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "So, are you saying she's not sick? She's just different?" "Yes," the doctor confirmed. "She is different, but not in a way that should frighten you. If anything, she may grow up with abilities that set her apart in remarkable ways. It's rare, extremely rare but not harmful. She is strong and very much healthy." Amara's heart pounded with both relief and confusion. She looked at her daughter again, who lay quietly in her arms, her unusual eyes blinking up at her as though she understood every word spoken in that room. Tears filled Amara's eyes. For the first time since the birth, she felt hope instead of fear. But outside the hospital walls, the story had already begun to spread. Neighbors whispered that the child was a bad omen. Some said she was a spirit sent to test the family, while others warned Tunde that raising her could bring misfortune. In their compound back in Surulere, people gathered in small groups, gossiping and shaking their heads. Children teased one another with exaggerated tales of the strange baby. It cut deeply into Amara when she heard the comments, but she held her daughter closer, determined not to let the cruelty of others break her. At the same time, a few neighbors noticed things that gave them pause. The baby rarely cried except when truly hungry, and when she did, her voice carried with a strange resonance that seemed to quiet the room. On one occasion, Amara found her daughter staring at the ceiling, following movements of a small gecko with eyes so focused it seemed unnatural for a newborn. People who saw these small moments began to whisper differently. They no longer called her a curse but began to wonder if she was touched by God, chosen for something beyond the ordinary. Tunde tried to shield his family from the gossip, but he could not ignore how quickly the story was spreading. He returned from work one evening to find his mother at their doorstep, demanding to see the child for herself. She lifted her granddaughter, studied her strange but beautiful features, and instead of recoiling, she nodded thoughtfully. "This child is not a mistake," she said firmly. "The world may not understand her now, but one day they will. Protect her with everything you have." Her words gave Tunde the courage he needed. Though uncertain of what the future held, he resolved never to let fear dictate how they raised their daughter. He and Amara decided they would not hide her or treat her like a burden. Instead, they would give her love, education, and the chance to grow into whoever she was meant to be. That night, As the city lights of Lagos twinkled outside their small apartment window, Amara rocked her baby to sleep. The child's unusual eyes fluttered shut, and a strange peace filled the room. In the midst of doubts, rumors, and fear, a truth had been uncovered. She was not cursed, not broken, but a rare gift. And though the world might not yet be ready to understand her, destiny was already unfolding quietly in their arms. Years passed, and the little girl once spoken of in whispers grew into a young woman who could no longer be ignored. Her name was Zara, and from childhood, it was clear she was different. By the time she was 5, her sharp vision and memory astonished her teachers. She could read a book once and recite entire passages without missing a word. At 8, she solved mathematical problems that left even university students baffled. And by the time she was 12, her ability to see patterns, predict movements, and notice details invisible to others drew attention far beyond her Lagos neighborhood. But for every person who celebrated her gift, there were others who mocked or feared it. Some parents in the community discouraged their children from playing with her, muttering that she was not normal. Others insisted she was blessed, even divine, and treated her with a strange mix of awe and suspicion. Amara bore the brunt of it, all neighbors who shook their heads when Zara passed by, church members who suggested prayers of deliverance, and friends who advised her to hide her daughter's uniqueness. But Amara refused. With Tunde's support, she encouraged Zara to shine in her studies, protecting her fiercely whenever people tried to tear her down. Zara herself grew used to the stares. She developed a quiet confidence, knowing that, though people doubted her, she carried something within that they could not understand. She excelled in secondary school, winning competitions across Lagos and later across Nigeria. Her intelligence and unusual abilities brought scholarships and invitations to science fairs and conferences. Soon, international organizations began to notice her name. By 16, Zara was already making headlines as the Nigerian genius girl with extraordinary vision. Global attention followed quickly. International media flew into Lagos to cover her story, astonished by her rare gifts and the resilience of her journey. Universities from America, Europe, and Asia sent letters of interest. For the first time, Amara and Tunde felt the weight of the years lift from their shoulders. The same child who had been met with whispers of shame at her birth was now the pride of a nation, her story spreading across the world as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and destiny. But the most striking transformation came from the very people who once doubted her. Neighbors who had called her cursed now boasted of living in the same street as her parents. Those who once crossed the road to avoid the family now begged to be included in her story. Relatives who had distanced themselves suddenly reappeared, claiming they had always known Zara was special. Amara, though polite, never forgot how quickly people had turned their backs when she needed them most. She smiled at their praises but kept her circle small, cherishing only those who had stood by them from the beginning. Zara, however, carried no bitterness. She remained humble, treating everyone with kindness. She often told her mother, "They only feared what they didn't understand. Now they see, and they want to belong to it." Her calm maturity only deepened people's respect for her. One defining moment came when she was invited to present her research on renewable energy solutions at an international conference in Abuja. Zara was just 18, yet her presentation left experts stunned. She explained complex theories with clarity and proposed practical solutions to Nigeria's power problems that were both innovative and realistic. When she finished, the entire hall erupted in applause. It was then that Amara, sitting quietly in the audience, finally broke down in tears. She remembered the night in the hospital when whispers had filled her ears, when fear had almost drowned her joy. Now, in that same country that had once doubted her, her daughter stood on stage as a beacon of hope. Reporters crowded around after the conference, desperate for interviews. Social media trended her name for weeks, hailing her as a symbol of African brilliance. Invitations poured in from governments, organizations, and world leaders. Zara found herself on magazine covers, not as a curiosity, but as an inspiration. Her life became proof that difference was not a curse, but a gift, a reminder to never underestimate what destiny could shape from humble beginnings. At home, Tunde and Amara often sat together, marveling at how far their daughter had come. Tunde would say, We once wondered why fate chose us. Now I know it wasn't about our strength, but about teaching us that love is stronger than fear. Amara would nod, watching Zara as she worked late into the night, her unusual eyes glowing softly under the light. The world saw a prodigy, a genius destined for greatness. But to her parents, she was still their little girl, the child they had once cradled with trembling hands in that Lagos hospital. They knew her journey had just begun, and though fame and recognition had come, the most powerful part of her story was not her abilities but her resilience. She had taken rejection and turned it into revelation, transforming doubt into wonder. And so, Zara's life became more than a personal triumph. It became a message. To every child born different, to every parent struggling with fear, and to every society quick to judge, her story stood as living proof that what begins as rejection can blossom into revelation. She was no longer the baby who silenced a delivery room with uncertainty. She was the young woman who silenced the world with brilliance.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more teachable and inspiring folk tales by Effie.